Hello, and welcome back to the Foundations of Faith series, the Bridge Builders Code, Volume 1. Chapter 3. Jake Weston had seen his share of broken things, relationships, expectations, a few drywall corners, but the bridge must have taken the prize. He stood at the base of it now, boots rooted in a patch of stubborn mud, staring up at the twisted steel and splintered beams like they might bite. Weeds grew thick around the pylons, creeping like shame, and rust streaked down the sides of the unfinished frame as if the structure itself had cried and no one came to wipe the tears. A section of rebar jutted like a broken rib, and an old caution sign hung limp from a single nail, flapping aimlessly in the breeze. The wind carried the scent of wet iron and pine sap, earthy and unsettled, like the land itself hadn't made peace with the project's silence. Parts of it sagged where time had gnawed through the bolts. One section leaned so hard to the right it looked like a metaphor. "Well," Jake muttered, shielding his eyes from the morning sun, "this ought to be easy." He glanced around as if expecting someone to disagree, but the only witnesses were a blue jay on the railing and a curious squirrel chewing through an old sandbag. The squirrel paused mid-chew to size him up, then resumed without concern. Jake gave a half-hearted shrug. "Yeah, I wouldn't bet on me either." From a distance, the bridge still looked noble, an unfinished dream draped across a determined river. But up close, it was a mess. Its bones were weary, its joints worn thin by weather and neglect, which, come to think of it, was how Jake felt too. There was something brutally honest about it. No hiding the damage, no coat of paint to soften the truth, just rust, splinters, and sagging joints. It didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. Jake respected that more than he wanted to admit. He pulled the leather journal from his jacket pocket and flipped it open to the first full page. The entry wasn't long. "Lay the first beam with prayer, not pressure. You'll be tempted to impress them, to prove something. Don't. Start with God. That's the only way this thing holds." Jake stared at the words, thumb tracing the edge of the page. The handwriting was slightly smudged in places, like his dad had written it in the middle of a job site. Maybe with a glove on, maybe in the rain. It was comforting, somehow. Imperfect. Real. He could still hear the town gossip, carried on wind and memory. Some claimed the bridge was a magnet for trouble, bad luck in timber and steel. Others said it was a waste of taxpayer money, a stubborn relic from a man who didn't know when to quit. Most just muttered about it at the diner and told themselves Silver Ridge was better off with a detour. And now Jake had returned, which meant the whispers would return too. He could practically script them in his head. Jake Weston, come back to finish what his daddy couldn't, or mess it up worse. The spotlight was too dim for glory, but just bright enough to catch failure in full detail. He closed the journal and let out a slow breath, watching it fog in the crisp morning air. The bridge wasn't the only thing needing repair. He knew that, but it was a start. By mid-morning, he'd made the mistake of stopping at Rose's cafe for coffee. Rose herself, short, sharp, and a master of public commentary, eyed him over her glasses as she poured his drink. "You know folks are already talking," she said without invitation. Jake stirred cream into the paper cup. "They always do." Rose hummed. "This time it's about you. That bridge hasn't seen a soul in years. You come back sniffing around it, and folks get curious." "I'm not sniffing," Jake said. "I'm just walking the site." "With a measuring tape, a journal, and a tool belt?" she asked accusingly. He raised an eyebrow. "If it walks like a foreman and sketches like a Weston," she added, "I'll call it what it is." Rose leaned in. "Listen, that bridge has been nothing but a skeleton since your daddy passed. Every year someone floats a theory about what should be done with it. A park, a teardown, One fellow wanted to turn it into a zip line. No one's followed through. Jake nodded slowly. Maybe it's time someone did. Well now, she said, placing her hands on her hips. Ain't that a loaded maybe? Rose blinked once. You really thinking about staying? I don't know, Jake admitted. And that was the truth. He didn't know. He had come back to settle something, not to start over. He had no real plan, just a journal and a tug in his chest that hadn't let up since he read that line about prayer and pressure. Well, Rose said, setting down the coffee pot, if you do stay, you'll need more than prayer. You'll need plywood, permits, and people who still believe in it. Not sure you've got any of those three, she paused, then added, almost softer, Silver Ridge doesn't hand out second chances easy, especially not to its own. Jake chuckled, tipping his cup to her. Appreciate the encouragement. She smirked. Just don't expect a discount on your eggs. He raised his cup in mock salute as Rose turned to finish making her rounds of coffee refills. Jake stepped back into the cool morning air, coffee in hand, and Rose's words still clanging around in his chest louder than the bell on her cafe door. Plywood, permits, people. It wasn't just a shopping list, it was a challenge, one only someone with something to prove would take seriously. He paused at the corner, glancing down toward the road that led to the bridge. This wasn't just about fixing wooden bolts. It was about asking a town that had already buried its hopes to dig them back up. And if he was being honest, it would be easier to rebuild the bridge than convince Silver Ridge to believe in anything again, especially him. Still, the journal was in his pockets. The memories were rising like the floodwater, and something in him refused to turn around. Jake exhaled through his nose, took a long sip of the coffee, lukewarm now, and headed toward the river. He spent the rest of the day walking the bridge perimeter with the journal under one arm and a pencil tucked behind his ear. Some of the beams were salvageable, others not so much. A few had warped under weather and neglect. One had actually splintered at the base, like it gave up waiting for help. Jake crouched beside it, running his hand over the cracked grain. This'll never hold, he whispered. Not just about the beam. The breeze picked up and rustled the overgrowth beneath his boots, like the weeds themselves were eavesdropping. He looked out across the span again, not just seeing steel and rot, but moments. His dad's laugh ricocheting across the river, his own younger footsteps shadowing the grown-up ones ahead. A town picnic where the mayor declared the bridge a symbol of new beginnings, though nobody remembered why. He sat back in the dirt, the river humming below. His father had believed this bridge was worth finishing. Jake wasn't sure he agreed, but there was something in the way the journal entries read, like they were written for him, not just by him. Lay the first beam with prayer. Jake closed his eyes. He didn't know how to fix the town's opinion. He didn't know if staying would mend what had broken. But maybe, just maybe, he could start the right way. No grand gesture, no press release. Just one beam, one prayer. He walked back to the workbench that evening and cleared more space, pushing aside rusted metal and old coffee cans. He set the journal down, opened to the entry again, and reached for a pencil. Then he paused. His hands hovered for a moment, calloused fingers unsure whether they were reaching for tools or trust. The silence in the shop felt full somehow. Not empty, not abandoned, but waiting. Instead of drawing, he knelt beside the bench. He didn't know what to say at first, so he said the truth. God, if this is you, I'm going to need more than a blueprint. I'm going to need you in every nail, every board, every decision. I don't want to rebuild something you didn't ask me to. The wind shifted outside. The workshop creaked. A bolt rolled off the pegboard behind him and clinked to the floor. Jake looked over, half expecting to see someone there, but no one was, just the echo of something beginning. He opened his eyes and stood. Then, in silence, he pulled out a fresh sheet of graph paper and began to sketch. Thank you again for joining us for this reading of the Bridge Builders Code. That was Chapter 3, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a good day.